A man who lives alone without a woman often hears that he's independent, that he's strong, that he's doing things on his own terms, and on the surface, that sounds like the ultimate win, doesn't it? No one to report to, no compromises, no navigating someone else's emotions, no expectations pulling at your time and energy. He wakes up when he wants, eats what he wants, watches what he wants, and maybe even thinks to himself, this is freedom, this is strength. But here's the truth nobody likes to talk about. Independence isn't the same thing as strength, and it's definitely not the same thing as happiness, because you can be independent and still be disconnected. You can be alone and still be running from intimacy, from vulnerability, from growth. A man who lives alone has a unique opportunity. Solitude can either be his weapon or his weakness. It depends on what he does with it. See, a lot of men believe that just because they're not needy, they're winning. Just because they don't require someone else to feel okay, they assume they've mastered life. But strength isn't measured by how alone you can be. It's measured by how real you're willing to be when someone else is close enough to see your flaws. Living alone can sometimes give the illusion of strength because there's no friction. No resistance, no emotional tension, but that's not strength. That's an empty gym. You don't build muscle without some resistance, and you don't build emotional resilience without someone challenging you to grow. You wake up every day by yourself, and there's a comfort in that. No one questioning your choices, no one confronting your habits, no one challenging your routines. But comfort is a dangerous thing when it goes unchecked. It makes you forget that growth lives outside it. A man who is truly strong doesn't need to isolate to feel in control. He doesn't need to cut off the world to feel peace. He learns how to manage chaos without needing to disappear from it. And let's be honest, some men use independence as a mask. They wear solitude like armor, not because they love being alone, but because they're afraid of what connection might ask of them. What if someone sees their mess? What if someone calls them out on the things they've avoided? What if someone gets too close and it all falls apart? So they convince themselves they're better off alone. They turn silence into safety, distance into discipline, but deep down they're not building, they're hiding. There's a line between peace and avoidance, and most men don't realize when they've crossed it. They think they're in control, but really, they've just eliminated anything that forces them to change. And what they call independence is often just emotional stagnation. There's no feedback loop, no accountability, no reflection. They make their own rules and they never have to question them. But the truth is, you don't grow in a vacuum. You don't evolve by removing every emotional trigger. You evolve by facing them, by letting someone in and being forced to look at yourself in a way you never had to before. A relationship isn't just companionship, it's a mirror. It reflects back all the things you need to work on. Your patience, your empathy, your temper, your insecurities. When you're alone, there's no one to push those buttons. But when you're with someone, suddenly you realize the places where you're still a boy pretending to be a man. That's when the real work starts. That's when growth kicks in. And that's why so many men avoid it. Because it's hard, because it's uncomfortable, because it forces you to confront things you'd rather leave in the dark. But that discomfort is where your strength is forged, not in the silence of your apartment, not in your perfectly curated routine, not in your ability to be alone. Your strength is revealed when you allow yourself to be seen, known, challenged, and still choose to stay open. That takes courage, that takes maturity. That's what real independence looks like, not needing to be alone to feel in control. And look, living alone doesn't make you weak. It's not a failure. In fact, it can be powerful if you use it right. If you use that time to understand yourself better, to heal from past wounds, to become someone who isn't desperate for a relationship, but prepared for one. But if you're using it to protect yourself from ever having to deal with someone else's truth or your own, then you're not free. You're just numb. The kind of man who's truly strong is the one who doesn't fear connection. He knows that being close to someone might expose his flaws, but he's ready for that. He's not perfect, but he's present. He's not looking to escape discomfort, he's learning to grow through it. That's the difference. So yes, live alone. Learn to enjoy your own company, build your life, build your peace, but don't confuse isolation with power. And don't confuse silence with growth. Use your solitude to become the man who's not just okay without a woman, but strong enough to be truly great with one. Most men think emotional growth just happens over time. That if they stay focused, keep pushing through life, avoid drama, and don't get involved in anything too messy, they'll eventually become emotionally strong. But that's not how it works. You don't grow emotionally by avoiding discomfort. You grow by going through it. And for the man who lives alone without a woman, there's a challenge here that often gets ignored. No one is there to test you. No one is there to stretch your emotional limits. No one is there to reflect your blind spots back at you. When a man lives alone, his world can become a carefully curated bubble. His schedule is his own. His space is untouched. His thoughts go unchallenged. And because no one's stepping on his emotional toes, he believes he's evolved. But the absence of tension isn't growth. It's just a lack of friction. It's not that you've developed emotional maturity. It's that you've removed all the situations that would require it. A relationship brings you face to face with your emotional weaknesses in a way nothing else does. When you love someone, your fears, your control issues, your insecurities, they all rise to the surface. You can't hide behind your routines. You can't shut down and pretend nothing happened. You have to face the conversation. You have to look someone in the eyes and admit when you're wrong. You have to explain why you shut down, why you raise your voice, why you run. That's where the work is. Alone, there's no real pressure to improve those things. You're not being emotionally challenged, and over time that absence of challenge gets mistaken for peace. But emotional peace isn't the absence of problems. It's the ability to navigate them. The man who never opens himself to connection never truly knows where he stands emotionally because he hasn't allowed the one thing that forces him to evolve, emotional confrontation. Some men wear solitude like a badge of honor. They say things like, "I don't need anyone. I'm self-sufficient. I've got my life together." But self-sufficiency without vulnerability is just self-preservation. And if all you've done is preserve your emotions rather than expand them, you haven't grown. You've just hidden better. That's not evolution. That's emotional stagnation. It's in love, in connection, in the mess of it all, that a man becomes emotionally aware. It's the late-night arguments. It's the misunderstandings. It's the moment someone tells you, "You hurt me," and you don't shut down, but instead you lean in. That's the work. That's the test. And without it, you can spend your whole life thinking you've healed, when really, you've just avoided being wounded again. Living alone can protect a man from that kind of confrontation, and at first it feels powerful. There's no need to explain yourself, no one poking at your past, no one holding up a mirror. You've got your peace, but the price is growth. Because you've also got no one drawing out your capacity for patience, your depth of empathy, your ability to forgive, your willingness to be wrong. Real emotional maturity comes when a man is willing to sit in discomfort without running. And love will give you plenty of opportunities to practice that. But when you're alone, who's challenging you, who's holding you to a higher standard emotionally, who's making sure you're not just emotionally coasting? The truth is, relationships are emotional resistance training. Just like muscles grow when they're pushed beyond their comfort zone, your emotional strength grows when your heart is asked to carry more than it's used to. When you're with someone and you want to walk away, but instead you stay and talk it out. When you want to blame, but instead you listen. When you want to shut down, but instead you open up. That's where the growth happens. That's what makes a man emotionally powerful. A man who lives alone might think he's evolved because he feels calm all the time. But calm isn't always peace. Sometimes it's just the absence of accountability. And while it may seem like you're in control, the truth is you might be missing the very thing that would help you grow into the kind of man who can lead, love, and connect on a deeper level. You can't grow emotionally in a vacuum. You can read all the books, listen to all the podcasts, and master your routines, but until someone close enough calls you out, breaks your pattern, or asks you to show up when it's hard, you're still practicing in theory. Love takes that theory and throws it into real life. It tests your ability to stay grounded when your ego wants to explode. It reveals the difference between a man who knows the right thing and a man who does the right thing when it's uncomfortable. So don't fool yourself into thinking that just because you're alone, you're strong. Don't believe that peace equals power. Ask yourself, when's the last time I was emotionally tested? When's the last time I had to apologize and mean it? When's the last time I had to regulate myself, not because I had to, but because someone else mattered enough? Because without that reflection, without that confrontation, you're not growing. You're just surviving. And the man who survives without love might be intact, but he's incomplete. One of the biggest illusions a man can buy into when he lives alone without a woman is the idea that freedom is the ultimate goal. That if he can just reach a place where no one tells him what to do, no one expects anything from him, no one questions his choices, he's won. He believes that if he can just cut out the complications, avoid the conflict, stay on his own path, he'll finally be happy. And for a while, that freedom feels like victory. He moves how he wants. He spends how he wants. He answers to no one. He tells himself this is what it means to be a man in control of his life, but slowly, almost too slowly to notice, that same freedom can become a cage. At first it looks like space, then it starts to look like isolation. It looks like peace, but underneath there's a quiet sense of disconnection. He has no one checking in, no one to push him, no one to challenge him. And that freedom, once so exciting, starts to feel empty, because what makes life rich isn't just the ability to do whatever you want, it's the presence of someone who makes your choices matter. When a man has no one to disappoint, he also has no one to impress. When there's no one who needs his best, he slowly stops giving it. When he lives in a world without real accountability, his standards drop, not because he's lazy, but because no one's around to see the difference. Living alone can be a powerful chapter, but too many men get stuck there, not because they can't find someone, but because they've built such a controlled environment that they've convinced themselves it's the only way they can stay sane. They've replaced real connection with convenience. They've traded intimacy for predictability. They've told themselves that it's better to be alone and free than to be in something where they might have to bend, stretch, or change. But here's the thing, true freedom doesn't come from doing what you want. It comes from becoming the kind of man who can handle what love asks of him. It comes from knowing you can be close to someone, face the fire, stay grounded, and not lose yourself. Most men avoid relationships not because they don't want love, but because they don't trust who they'll become when that love starts revealing their weaknesses. When you're alone, you can hide your flaws. You can keep your bad habits. You can manage your life exactly how you want. But that's not power. That's comfort disguised as control. And control, when it becomes your God, will eventually leave you empty. Because love, real love, asks you to surrender some of that control. It asks you to be seen, to be vulnerable, to be accountable, and that's where the fear creeps in. Because control is safe, control is predictable. Control means you never have to feel rejected, but control also keeps you from growing, and in a life without love, without emotional tension, without someone who sees your soul and says, "I need more from you," you risk living a life that looks successful on the outside and feels hollow on the inside. You see men all the time who have built empires alone. They've built bodies, businesses, routines, systems. They've got the perfect life on paper. But no one really knows them. No one gets in. No one reaches that place inside where love lives, because that part of them hasn't been touched in years, maybe ever. And freedom without intimacy, becomes a slow drift toward loneliness. It doesn't hit like a crash, it creeps in. One night, you realize your victories feel a little less sweet, your days blur together, the silence in your home gets louder, and suddenly you wonder if you've built a life so focused on control that you've locked yourself out of your own heart. When a man has no one to grow for, he forgets what he's capable of. He forgets how much better he could be, not for approval, not for validation, but for the simple reason that someone he loves deserves the best version of him. Love doesn't cage you, it wakes you up, it pulls out your potential, it challenges your selfishness, it makes your time mean something, and yes, it takes work, yes, it takes effort, but that's where fulfillment is. Not in the easy days, in the days that require you to show up when everything in you wants to stay small. So no, freedom isn't bad, solitude isn't wrong, but when you turn them into your identity, when you use them as a wall, you're not living, you're avoiding. You're playing it safe, and a man who plays it safe with his heart will never know what he's truly capable of feeling, giving, or becoming. You don't need a woman to complete you, but if you shut out love because it threatens your control, you're not strong, you're scared. And you're missing the very thing that would make all your freedom worth something. There's a common story many men tell themselves when they live alone without a woman, that their masculinity is whole, complete, and unshaken because they're self-sufficient. They believe that by standing on their own, handling everything themselves, and avoiding emotional entanglements, they've achieved a kind of power that no one else can take away. But the truth is, masculinity without love is incomplete. It's like holding a pen without ink. It might look right, it might feel solid in your hand, but it can't write the story that matters. Masculinity is often painted as this rugged, independent force, strong, stoic, unbreakable. And there's value in that, but the full picture is much deeper. Real masculinity embraces not just strength, but vulnerability. It's the courage to show up fully, to be seen, and to connect deeply with someone else. Without that connection, masculinity becomes something hollow. It's a shell, not a home. A man who lives alone can convince himself that he's powerful because he doesn't rely on anyone. But what he might not realize is that masculinity is not just about what you do for yourself, but what you can give to someone else. It's about being present enough to listen, patient enough to understand, and open enough to be changed by another person. Without love, those parts of masculinity remain dormant, waiting for the right relationship to awaken them. Love challenges a man's pride and forces him to confront parts of himself he might otherwise ignore. It makes him question his patterns, his habits, and his assumptions. That challenge isn't a weakness, it's a vital part of growth. Masculinity without love is like a muscle that never gets exercised. It might look strong, but it's not developing the flexibility, endurance, or depth that real strength requires. A man who lives without that kind of intimate connection often misses out on the most powerful aspect of his masculinity, the ability to be vulnerable without losing himself. It's easy to be tough when no one's around to see your struggles. It's easy to keep the mask on when you're alone, but real strength is shown when you drop the mask in front of someone who truly cares and trusts that they will still stand by you. That is the point where a man becomes truly masculine, not by hiding his feelings, but by sharing them. That kind of vulnerability is what creates connection, and connection is what fuels emotional strength. When a man is alone, he may believe he's mastered himself, but in truth, he's only mastered his solitude. There's a vast difference between being alone and being isolated emotionally, and that emotional isolation is where masculinity can wither. Relationships invite a man to practice empathy and compassion. They teach patience and forgiveness. They demand self-awareness and emotional responsibility. These aren't soft qualities. They are the foundation of a powerful, grounded masculinity. A man who has never had to practice these things can be strong in many ways, but his strength is incomplete. It's missing the depth that comes from loving and being loved in return. There's also something uniquely transformative about seeing yourself through the eyes of someone who loves you. A woman's love can reflect back the best parts of a man, encouraging him to grow into those parts he may have kept hidden. It also gently reveals where he needs to improve. That reflection is essential because it pushes a man beyond his comfort zone, helping him become more than he ever thought possible. Living alone might feel like freedom, but it can also mean missing out on this kind of growth. Without love, masculinity can become rigid, defensive, and lonely. It can turn into a fortress that keeps others out, but also keeps out the very experiences that would enrich and complete a man's life. So yes, a man can be self-sufficient and capable alone, but if he never opens himself to love, he will never experience the full spectrum of what it means to be a man. True masculinity isn't about standing alone, it's about standing with someone, allowing that connection to make you stronger, deeper, and more alive. At the end of the day, masculinity without love isn't a finished story. It's a chapter waiting to be written. And when a man finally steps into love, he doesn't lose power. He gains it in ways he never imagined possible.